Subscribe to Dr. Nightmare Channel now.
Story 1. The Vanishing of Daniel Cross. On the night of December 9th, 2018, the city of Ashford was alive with the usual weekend noise. Music spilling out of crowded clubs, footsteps echoing down cold streets, laughter and shouting mixing with the winter wind. But for one man, this night would not end with a safe trip home. Instead, it would end in silence, in mystery, and in a chilling disappearance that still haunts those who knew him. His name was Daniel Cross, a 25-year-old with a bright future ahead of him. Friends described him as kind, soft-spoken, the type of man who avoided conflict. He worked at a local tech company, still living close to his family, and everyone who knew him said he was steady, reliable, the last person they would ever expect to simply vanish. But vanish he did. That night, Daniel had gone out with a group of friends to the Iron Lantern, a popular nightclub in downtown Ashford. It wasn't the type of place he usually frequented, loud, chaotic, with more people spilling outside than inside. But one of his co-workers had just been promoted, and Daniel wanted to celebrate. Witnesses recall the club being particularly packed that night, shoulder to shoulder, with a heavy smell of sweat, beer, and cheap perfume clinging to the air. Somewhere inside that haze of flashing lights and drunken voices, Daniel got into an argument. No one remembers exactly what it was about. Some say it was over a spilled drink. Others recall raised voices near the bar. But whatever happened, it ended with security escorting Daniel outside into the freezing night. It was just after midnight when he stepped into the darkness of the parking lot, his breath visible in the air, the music behind him muffled by closed doors. His friends assumed he'd cooled down, maybe grab a cab, maybe walk the short distance home. But Daniel never made it home. In fact, from that moment on, he seemed to evaporate into the city itself. The next morning, Daniel's mother, Claire, began calling his phone. At first, she thought he had crashed at a friend's place, but as the hours stretched on and the calls went unanswered, dread began to set in. By that evening, she knew something was terribly wrong. Daniel was not the kind of man to disappear. By Sunday morning, word had spread quickly, and volunteers began to gather at Riverbend Park, just a few miles from the nightclub. The park sat beside the Blackwood River, a dark, winding body of water known for its treacherous currents. Nearly 200 people, including friends, family, and strangers who had heard about Daniel's case, fanned out along the icy riverbanks, calling his name, their voices echoing in the frozen air. The search lasted hours, stretching into days. They combed through thickets of bare winter trees, checked beneath bridges, and scanned every inch of the shoreline. Police dogs were brought in, and boats patrolled the water. But nothing surfaced. Not a body, not a shoe, not a trace of Daniel. It was as though the night had swallowed him whole. Then, a week later, a disturbing discovery was made. In the parking lot of the Iron Lantern, beneath a thin layer of frost, searchers found Daniel's glasses. Shattered, one lens cracked, the frame bent beyond repair. To anyone else, it may have seemed like a small detail, but to his family, it was a chilling revelation. Daniel had terrible vision. Without those glasses, he could barely see beyond a few feet. His mother later said, "There was no way he could have walked far without them. He would have been completely vulnerable." The thought that her son had been stumbling half-blind through the city streets in the dead of night filled her with horror. Not long after, surveillance footage provided by a nearby fast food restaurant added to the mystery. At around 2 a.m., Daniel was captured on camera walking alone down the street. His movements were slow, unsteady, almost as though he were disoriented. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders hunched against the cold. The footage was grainy, but those who knew him said it was unmistakably Daniel. 45 minutes later, he appeared again on another camera, this time farther down the same road, closer to the Blackwood River. And then, nothing. That was the last confirmed sighting of Daniel Cross. Rumors quickly began to swirl around Ashford. Some believed Daniel had wandered toward the river, blind and confused, and slipped into its icy depths. It was a simple explanation, maybe even the most logical one. But for many, it didn't add up. For one, search teams had dragged the river multiple times. If he had fallen in, his body should have surfaced within days. The Blackwood River was unforgiving, but it did not keep secrets long. Others suggested something darker, that perhaps someone had followed Daniel, taking advantage of his vulnerability. The broken glasses, after all, suggested a struggle. And then there was the unsettling fact that the glasses were found in the parking lot of the club, not near the river. Did something happen to him there, right after he was thrown out? Daniel's father, Mark, was haunted by that question. He returned to the nightclub's parking lot almost every night after work, standing where his son's last known steps had been, staring at the broken glasses as though they held the answers. "It feels like he just dissolved," he once told a local reporter. "One minute he's there, the next he's gone. People don't just disappear into thin air. Someone knows what happened to my boy." The longer Daniel remained missing, the stranger the case began to feel. His phone had never been recovered. His bank accounts were untouched. His social media remained silent. It was as if his life had been paused mid-sentence. Over time, the story of Daniel Cross spread beyond Ashford. True crime enthusiasts debated his case online, analyzing the grainy footage frame by frame, speculating about every detail. Some were convinced he had been lured away by someone he trusted. Others were sure he had been taken against his will. A few went so far as to suggest something supernatural, that the Blackwood River itself had claimed him, dragging him into its depths without leaving a trace. But to Daniel's family, the truth was far more terrifying. Their son had been alive, breathing, walking the streets of Ashford one cold December night, and then he was gone. Years later, the case remains unsolved. The Iron Lantern has since closed down, its neon sign removed, its parking lot empty except for weeds breaking through the asphalt. But to those who knew Daniel, the memory of that night is still raw. His glasses remain in a small evidence bag, locked away in a drawer, the only physical piece left of a young man whose story ends not with answers, but with silence. When people walk past the Blackwood River at night, they whisper about Daniel Cross. They imagine his figure wandering the banks, half blind, searching for home. They talk about how quickly someone can be erased from the world, how the city itself seemed to swallow him. And every December, on the anniversary of his disappearance, his family gathers at Riverbend Park. They light candles, place flowers by the river's edge, and call his name into the darkness. The water never answers. The night stays silent. Story 2. The Haunting Mail of Emily Harrow. It began with a funeral. In the autumn of 2002, 12-year-old Emily Harrow stood beside her mother and younger brother as they watched a casket lowered into the cold ground of Ravenwood Cemetery. Inside, they were told, lay the remains of her father, Thomas Harrow, who had died in what police described as a devastating car accident. The wreck had been so violent that his body was barely recognizable. The family had been advised, urged in fact, to hold a closed casket service. Emily remembered the way her mother, Margaret, stood stiff and pale, her face carved from grief, clutching Emily's hand so hard her fingers ached. She remembered the whispers of neighbors, the smell of wet leaves, the dull thud of earth hitting wood. At 12, she thought, death was final, irreversible. You bury the body, you grieve, and life goes on. But life did not go on. Not for Emily, not for her family. Because in the weeks after the funeral, something began to happen. Something no one could explain. It started small. A package appeared in their mailbox one gray November afternoon. There was no return address, no postage markings, nothing to indicate where it had come from. The only writing on it was Emily's name, scrawled in messy, unfamiliar letters. Inside was a small trinket, a miniature model of St. Paul's clock tower, the kind of souvenir one might buy from a gift shop. Emily had no memory of ever seeing it before, but when she brought it into the kitchen, her mother froze. The color drained from Margaret's face. She whispered, That belonged to your father." Emily thought it was impossible. The piece was too familiar, too distinct. Her mother was certain it had once sat on her husband's desk. But how could it be here, in their mailbox, weeks after his death? At first, Margaret dismissed it as some cruel joke, a coincidence, or maybe even a theft. But deep down, something colder gnawed at her. The packages kept coming. Every few weeks, another item appeared. An antique stopwatch, broken and rusted, its hands frozen in place. A leather wallet, old and cracked, with faint initials engraved on the inside. A book of poetry with Thomas's handwriting scrawled in the margins. Each time, Emily's mother recognized the object. Each time, her face darkened with dread. "Where are they coming from?" Emily asked one night as they sat together at the kitchen table, the stopwatch between them. Her mother shook her head slowly. "I don't know. But these were his things. They were in our house. I packed them away after the accident. They shouldn't be here." The packages had no explanation. No one ever saw who delivered them. The postman swore he hadn't dropped them off. The neighbors never saw anything unusual. It was as though the items simply materialized in the mailbox, waiting for Emily. By December, things escalated. On Emily's 13th birthday, she opened the mailbox and found an envelope. It was addressed to her in the same messy handwriting. Inside was a birthday card. Her heart skipped when she opened it. The message inside read, "Happy birthday, Emily. Love, Mom and Dad." The handwriting was unmistakable. She had seen it before, on old letters, notes and cards tucked away in drawers. It was her father's handwriting. But worse than that, Emily recognized the card itself. It wasn't new. It was old, faded, worn at the corners. It was the very same card her parents had given her on her 7th birthday, years earlier. Her mother snatched it from her trembling hands, staring at it in disbelief. Then she whispered something that made Emily's blood run cold. "These aren't just his things. They're ours. They're from inside this house." Margaret rushed to their bedroom, to the small safe in the closet where she kept some of Thomas's belongings locked away. She tried to open it, but the combination, one she had used countless times, no longer worked. She twisted the dial again and again, her hands shaking, but it was useless. The safe would not open. It was as though someone or something had changed it. From that night on, the house felt different. The walls seemed colder, the air heavier. Emily swore she heard footsteps at night, slow and deliberate, moving down the hallway. She would wake to find her bedroom door slightly open, though she remembered closing it. Sometimes she thought she heard breathing in the dark, just beyond her bed. Her mother went to the police, desperate for answers, but the officers couldn't help. With no evidence of forced entry, no fingerprints, no proof of who was leaving the packages, their advice was simple. Install cameras, get an alarm system. Maybe it's a stalker. But Emily knew it wasn't just a stalker. Something far more sinister was happening. The packages kept coming. Each one felt more personal, more invasive. A pair of cufflinks Emily remembered seeing her father wear. A tie with a wine stain she remembered from a family dinner. A book of poetry with Thomas's handwriting scrawled in the margins. Each item was like a ghost returning, a reminder that her father was not gone, or at least not entirely. Emily's younger brother began to cry at night, saying he saw a man standing in the hallway. Her mother began sleeping with the lights on. The house was no longer a home. It was a place of dread, every creak of the floorboards sending shivers down her spines. And then, one night, Emily woke to find something waiting on her pillow. It was another envelope. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single piece of paper. On it, in her father's handwriting, were just 4 words. "I never left you." She screamed. Her mother ran into the room, saw the note, and broke down sobbing. She clutched Emily in her arms, whispering prayers through her tears. But the packages didn't stop. They continued for months, each one a twisted message, a cruel reminder. The police were helpless. The neighbors whispered. Some said Thomas had faked his death. Others said the family was cursed. To this day, no one knows who sent the packages or how they got those items. But Emily knows this much. Whatever haunted her family after her father's death was not done out of love. It was something darker, something that wanted them afraid, something that wanted them broken. And sometimes, late at night, Emily swears she still hears the sound of a key turning in the lock of that safe in her mother's closet, as though someone is waiting inside, ready to send another reminder. Story 3. The Disappearance of Claire Winters. It was the summer of 2006 in the small European city of Dunwich, a quiet place surrounded by rolling fields and industrial zones, where the air often carried the smell of machinery mixed with cut grass. It was the kind of town where everyone knew one another, and nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary, until the night Claire Winters vanished. Claire was 21 years old, studying design at a nearby college. Friends described her as warm and clever, the type of girl who could light up a room with her smile. On June 20th, she went out with a group of friends to a local Irish pub called the Green Harp, where they gathered to watch a World Cup match on the big screen. The night was filled with laughter, cheering, and the clinking of glasses. Nobody could have guessed it would be the last time anyone would see her alive. Her mother had dropped her off around 9 that evening, and Claire had promised she'd catch a ride or walk the short mile home. She didn't have much money with her, just a few coins in her purse. Around 11, she borrowed a phone battery from a friend to send a few final text messages, then returned it before leaving. When she stepped out of the pub into the cool night air, her friends assumed she'd make the quick walk home, but Claire never came back. The following morning, her roommate Sophie noticed her bed hadn't been slept in. She assumed Claire had stayed with a friend until noon came and went, and Claire failed to show up for work. Concerned, Sophie tried calling her phone. To her surprise, at 12:49 a.m. the night before, Claire had sent her a text, "Don't wait up, I'll be late." It made no sense. Claire was always responsible, never one to vanish without warning. Sophie contacted her mother, and together they reported her missing. For a day, silence. Then, something strange happened. Claire's phone rang. It was Sophie's number that lit up, and when Sophie answered, Claire's voice was on the other end. Her tone was calm, even friendly. She said she was fine, that she'd be home soon. When Sophie pressed her, "Where are you? Who were you with?" Claire gave vague, evasive answers. "Don't worry about me," she said softly. "I'll be back." But she never came back. Over the next week, Claire's friends and family received a total of 5 phone calls. Each one was brief, sometimes only a few words, always in the evening. Sometimes she sounded normal, almost cheerful. Other times, her voice trembled. In one call, when her sister begged her to be honest and asked, "Are you being held against your will?" Claire whispered, "Yes," but then quickly changed her tone and said louder, "No, I'm fine." The contradictions sent chills through everyone who heard it. The police tracked the signals from the phone. Every time she called, her location pinged from a different industrial zone around Dunwich. Abandoned warehouses, half-empty business parks, quiet areas with little foot traffic at night. Investigators believe the calls were made from a moving car. Whoever had her was keeping her alive long enough to make these calls, driving her from place to place, letting her family hear her voice just long enough to torture them with hope. And then suddenly, the calls stopped. On October 4th, nearly 4 months after she disappeared, Claire's body was discovered in a wooded area just outside the city. She was left in a shallow clearing, her remains partially hidden beneath fallen leaves. Time and the summer heat had reduced much of the evidence. The autopsy gave no clear answers. Her cause of death was listed as homicide, but the details were too degraded to provide clarity. The questions multiplied. Who had taken her? Why did they let her make those calls? Why keep her alive only to end her life later? Some believed her abductor wanted to play a cruel game, dangling her safety in front of her family before finally destroying it. Others believed Claire had managed to sneak moments of contact, slipping hints into her conversation before her captor stopped her. Sophie remembers the final call vividly. She said Claire's voice was different that night, lower, weaker, as if she was exhausted. "I'll come home soon," she had said. "I promise." It was the last promise she ever made. The police never found Claire's killer. No arrests were made. No suspects were ever charged. The case remains unsolved, a wound that never closed for her family. To this day, when residents of Dunwich walk past the old warehouses and empty lots where her phone once pinged, they imagine her voice echoing in the dark. A young woman, trapped in a car, speaking into the phone while someone listened beside her. They imagine her whispering yes before correcting herself in terror. They wonder what she saw in those final days, what she endured. Claire Winters stepped out of a pub on a warm June night, expecting to walk a mile home. Instead, she walked into a nightmare from which she never escaped. And every time the phone rings late at night, her family still thinks, just for a moment, that it might be her. Story 4. The Last Days of Victor Hale. On the surface, Victor Hale was a man who had everything. Respected, accomplished, and deeply involved in public service, He had spent decades climbing the ranks of influence in the city of Briarford, a place where politics and industry intertwined like tangled vines. He had once overseen veteran memorial projects, served as a consultant for transportation development, and was a trusted advisor to several city officials. People knew his name. They trusted his judgment. But in December of 2010, Victor's life came to an end in the most horrifying, confusing, and chilling way imaginable. His last days were a blur of erratic behavior, strange sightings, and desperate pleas for help that no one fully understood. And when his body was finally discovered, the mystery only deepened. It began on December 28th, when Victor boarded a train into Briarford after a business trip. He was seen leaving the station that evening, walking briskly through the freezing air, his suit wrinkled, his expression grim. Nothing seemed unusual, at least not yet. The next day, December 29th, the strangeness began. Around midday, Victor was spotted at the Crescent Street parking garage, wandering on foot. The security attendant on duty later described him as disoriented, unsettled, and strangely insistent. He was wearing only one shoe, limping slightly, shivering in the cold. He approached the booth and begged to be let inside, saying he needed to warm up before he paid his parking fee. His voice was urgent, his hands trembling. When the attendant asked him about his condition, Victor muttered something about his briefcase being stolen. He insisted he wasn't drunk, though the attendant admitted he looked unsteady. Against protocol, the attendant refused him entry, brushing him off as just another eccentric city wanderer. Hours later, CCTV footage captured Victor stumbling through the courthouse district. His tie was missing, his coat half-buttoned. He seemed lost, moving without direction. At one point, he leaned against a wall, breathing heavily, as if he had been running. Later that evening, Victor appeared at a small pharmacy on Kingston Avenue. The pharmacist recalled the encounter vividly. Victor asked for a ride into downtown Briarford, his voice hoarse, his face pale. When the pharmacist offered to call him a cab, Victor shook his head violently. No police, no taxis, just a ride. His desperation unsettled the man, who instead urged him to rest. Without another word, Victor stormed out into the night. The following day, December 30th, more witnesses came forward. Victor was seen drifting through the financial district, entering and exiting office buildings as though searching for something or someone. Several people remembered asking if he needed help. Each time he refused. His once proud posture was gone. He moved like a shadow of himself, exhausted, hunted. By December 31st, the mystery reached its breaking point. That morning, at the Ash Grove landfill on the edge of Briarford, a worker operating a garbage compactor made a horrifying discovery. As the machine lifted and released the contents of a massive disposal bin, a human body tumbled out onto the heap of trash below. It was battered, broken, the face bloodied beyond recognition. It was Victor Hale. The coroner's report confirmed the worst. Victor had been brutally assaulted. His cause of death was blunt force trauma. His body showed signs of a beating so vicious it shocked even the most seasoned investigators. Police traced the garbage truck's route back through the city. Every stop that day had been at large commercial bins located in the Newark district, just a few miles from his townhouse. Somewhere in that district, someone had discarded him like waste, as if his life had been nothing more than trash to be disposed of. The investigation into Victor's final days uncovered more confusion than clarity. Why had he been wandering the city, half-dressed, begging strangers for help? Why was he terrified of police involvement?
Who stole his briefcase, and what was inside it? Conspiracy theories erupted almost immediately. Some believed Victor had uncovered something dangerous, information tied to his work in city planning or defense contracts. Others suspected he had been followed, stalked, and silenced by powerful figures who wanted him erased. Still others whispered that Victor had simply suffered a mental collapse, spiraling into paranoia before falling victim to opportunistic attackers. But there were details no one could explain away. Why was he wearing only one shoe at the parking garage? What had happened to the other? Why did his calls for help sound so urgent, as though he knew someone was after him? And how had his body ended up in a dumpster, carried away like refuse, without a single clear witness? To this day, no answers have surfaced. Victor's townhouse remains empty, its windows dark, the door locked tight. The few belongings left inside were carefully cataloged by police, but his missing briefcase has never been found. The safe in his study was untouched, its secrets sealed. His neighbors still recall the sight of him on those final days, once a dignified figure, now reduced to a stumbling, frantic man whose fear was visible in every step. They speak of how he seemed to know something terrible, something no one else could see, and they wonder whether his death was a crime of opportunity or a carefully orchestrated execution. The Ash Grove landfill worker who discovered his body has since admitted he still dreams about it. He said the way Victor's body fell, broken and discarded, was like watching the city itself spit him out. The death of Victor Hale remains unsolved, his killers unpunished. But his final days paint a portrait more terrifying than any solution. A man unraveling in plain sight, begging for help, ignored by everyone who saw him until it was too late. Now when people walk through Briarford's courthouse district or pass by the Crescent Street garage, they whisper about him. They say his ghost still wanders there, one shoe missing, searching for the briefcase that held the secret of why he had to die. And on cold winter nights, when the city is quiet, some swear they can hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing through the empty garages and alleyways, the restless steps of a man who knew too much and who paid the ultimate price. Victor Hale's story is not just one of murder. It is one of unanswered questions, a spiral into fear, and the chilling truth that sometimes, when you cry for help, no one listens.
Story 5. The Phantom Exit of Adrian Cole. It was the spring of 2006 in Ravenhurst, a bustling college town known for its nightlife. Students poured into the streets every weekend, hopping between bars, chasing music and cheap drinks, losing themselves in the blur of neon lights. Among them was Adrian Cole, a medical student with a promising future, a devoted girlfriend, and a circle of loyal friends. On the night of April 1st, he joined two friends for what was meant to be a casual evening. They chose a popular second-floor bar called the Siren's Cove, a place well known among students. It wasn't particularly large, but it was lively, with a band playing that night and streams of patrons coming and going. Adrian seemed relaxed, even happy. Around 10 p.m., he stepped outside to call his girlfriend, telling her that he loved her and that he couldn't wait to see her after the weekend. It was a simple, normal moment, a final slice of everyday life. Later, surveillance footage showed him entering the bar again, weaving through the crowd. Minutes after midnight, cameras caught him stepping back outside briefly, chatting with two women near the entrance. He laughed, nodded, then turned and walked back inside. That was the last confirmed sighting of Adrian Cole. When the bar closed around 2 a.m., his friends expected to meet him near the exit, but Adrian never appeared. They searched the dance floor, the bathrooms, even outside on the street.
he was gone. The Siren's Cove had two entrances, the main front door, monitored by cameras, and a back door for staff, also under surveillance. Investigators scoured hours of footage. Every single person who entered the bar that night was seen leaving, except Adrian. He simply never walked out. It was as though the bar itself had swallowed him whole. At first, police suspected human error. Maybe the cameras missed him. Maybe he slipped out unnoticed. But detectives reviewed the footage frame by frame over and over, even bringing in experts. An FBI consultant specializing in facial recognition combed through the video for weeks. His conclusion was chilling. Adrian never left. This made no sense. There were no hidden exits, no tunnels, no secret doors. The building had been inspected thoroughly, yet somehow Adrian Cole walked into the Siren's Cove and never came out. The theories began almost immediately. Some believed he had slipped away in disguise, leaving behind his old life. But Adrian had no reason to vanish. His studies were going well, his relationship was strong, and he had no financial troubles. His phone, wallet, and bank accounts were never touched again. If he had run without preparation, without motive, without logic. Others whispered of darker possibilities. Some said he had been lured into a back room, ambushed and killed, his body smuggled out past the cameras in a way investigators never discovered. The bar's owners denied it, swearing no such thing was possible. And then there were the truly eerie rumors. Some insisted the Siren's Cove was cursed, that Adrian had stepped through a doorway that no one else could see, that somehow in the chaos of flashing lights and drunken laughter, he had found an exit that didn't exist. His girlfriend kept calling his phone for weeks after his disappearance. Most of the time, it went straight to voicemail. But one night, something strange happened. Instead of ringing out, the call connected. 3 rings before it went dead. Investigators traced the signal, but it led nowhere. They couldn't explain why the phone had come alive just once, long after Adrian had vanished. The bar itself became a pilgrimage for true crime enthusiasts. People would stand in the same spots Adrian was last seen, staring into the corners, searching for answers in the walls. The staff grew uneasy, saying they sometimes heard footsteps in the locked storage rooms or felt as if someone was brushing past them in empty hallways. Years passed, and Adrian Cole remained a phantom of Ravenhurst. His family never stopped searching, holding vigils every spring, his mother lighting a candle in her window each night. His friends grew older, graduated, moved away, but his absence lingered like a shadow in their memories. The Siren's Cove eventually closed, unable to escape the reputation of being the bar where a man disappeared into thin air. The building stands empty now, its windows boarded, graffiti marking the doors. At night, when the wind sweeps through the deserted street, locals claim they hear faint music drifting from inside, as though the band is still playing for a crowd that no longer exists. And sometimes, just sometimes, people say they see him, a young man in a dark shirt, standing near the doorway, smiling at someone who isn't there. Then he turns and walks back inside, never to be seen again. The case of Adrian Cole is still unsolved. His body has never been found. No evidence has ever surfaced to explain what happened. He simply walked into a bar and never walked out.